Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Authors on the Air. I'm your host, James Latwell. This is part of the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. And we're here today with Aaron Philip Clark. And Aaron has a new book out in collaboration with Curtis 50 Cent Jackson. And it's called The Accomplice. And I think this is your sixth book out now. And I mean, you've been known for, your thrillers and procedurals and kind of these novels of suspense. And this one takes a little bit different tact, and it was an enjoyable story. I think you did a bang up job on it, Aaron.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
So, can you tell folks a little bit about what the story is in The Accomplice?
Sure. I mean, I'll start by saying I'm happy to be here. This is great. And in terms of the accomplice, um, where can I start? So this is a if this was a film, this would be much bigger budget than I normally do. So I'll start there. I would do normally kind of independent, smaller stories, but this is designed to have that kind of big budget feel. And when I was working with Curtis, the idea was that we would do a heist book, and that was what Curtis was interested in. And so we wanted to shy away from the typical, I think, the trappings that we find with heist novels, which is, you got to move money, which is always a hurdle. And then if you're working with a team, well, you already know how that's going to go. Someone's going to get double crossed. There's going to be all these twists and turns in terms of, the personalities of the people on the team. So we wanted to shy away from that. And the idea that I came up with was to how far could one man go? How
Mm,
much could one man do just with sheer determination and his cleverness and his intelligence, and see, well, what sort of heist would one person be able to pull off and make it feel like it's grounded and it's realistic? And so that's kind of where Desmond came from. And
right.
the idea of not having to move money was a big part of it. So there's a lot of things that hold currency in this world. And one of those things is information. And
Yeah.
so being able to steal information, not to give a whole lot away, but
Right.
steal information and leverage that information for whatever the purpose may be, was kind of the nucleus of the story.
Yeah. No, that's really well done without giving too much away, because the information, is kind of a big turning point in the book. Now, you mentioned it, and it's kind of marketed as a heist novel, but to me, I mean, it's a thriller at its heart because it's so propulsive, and I mean, you wrote it very cinematically, like you're saying, and it just the story just moves through. But it has these characters that you really want to get to know, and especially, Desmond and Nia. And let's talk about Nia for a little bit. I mean, she's the first Black Texas Ranger woman in the job. How did you come to create that character for the accomplice?
Well, it all kind of came out of wanting to have some threads of a modern Western. And when we were discussing the idea in the story, we had said, oh, first we bounced around LA. Well, LA's been done, right? Then we
Yeah.
said New York, and then, there was some talk about like Chicago or something. And so we kind of felt like, let's move away from that, and put it in a region where we can have a little more fun, with it being essentially the modern day West, right? And so we realized there wasn't a lot of Black cowboy or cowgirl, cow person stories. You know what I mean? Like, you just didn't have that kind of,
Right.
at least not in modern day. And we wanted to kind of explore that a little bit. And so that's kind of was the foundation of Nia. And Curtis came to the table with the idea of making sure that she was female, and that in this case she would be queer. And I said, okay, let's work with that. And then I had already done a considerable amount of research on the first Black female Texas Ranger, Christine Nix. And so I kind of was enthralled with this idea of being the first, and what comes with that, and the amount of pressure that has to be on someone's shoulders when they're the first at something. And so that's kind of where she came from. And then we wanted to, at the same time, have a little bit of fish out of water a little bit. So she's not a Texan, but she is a transplant from New York to
Right.
Texas. So then you have that element of it of she came from a completely different environment and now she is in this other environment. She's trying to thrive and do the best that she can. Um, and that goes kind of askew sometimes because you know she's so focused on the job that she doesn't really understand the social politics that exist always around her. Like she understands them, she sees them, but she has no time for them. And I think that's because she is singular focused on doing this job and doing it good and well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, she's very focused on her job, and, you know, the environment that you dropped her into in Texas and in recent past, I mean, she's up against all kinds of forces, from within and, facing all kinds of discrimination and just everything from microaggressions to outright, bigotry. Um, I don't know if you ran across any of your research. How did Christine deal with that? I'm sure she had to face that.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, I didn't see anything explicitly about, you know, what that hurdle looked like. But I know, she's done different talks and she's participated in, the academy graduations and things like that, and has done different symposiums and things. But I didn't come across anywhere where she's very outspoken in terms of what she had to kind of contend with. Um, so I had to kind of use my imagination and run with that based on my own experience and the experiences of African American officers that I know. Not all necessarily being the first, but maybe being the only one in a department or a division. And
Right.
so it comes with a level of uh, understanding and then also being able to navigate certain elements of that. And she was very much. I actually, in terms of research, I went in. I watched Inside Man that Spike Lee had done because I really like Denzel's character, but he has this wonderful line where there's it's NYPD and there's a cop who's giving him kind of the rundown and telling him the story and is using some very insensitive and not politically correct language. And Denzel kind of stops him and says, "You know what? How about we cool out on the color commentary?" But it's so effective, you know what I mean,
It
without
is.
him having to say And so the guy's, "Oh, sorry, officer." This. I mean, that's how. That's all. Unfortunately, that's elements in language of the street, right?
Mhm.
And certain things come out of that within policing, and so he kind of lets him know, and then the guy's, "Oh, okay, I'm sorry," and then that was it. So I kind of created Christine around that notion of being able to walk, um, this kind of path where you don't want to show your hand too much. You don't want to wear your emotions on your sleeve and all these things. But she has to keep that stuff bottled up.
Yeah, and I think you kind of explain that story, Nia's story, as the accomplice unfolds, because I mean, and you touched on it. She's so focused on the job that basically everything around her starts to crumble. I mean, she's sacrificed a lot for this job, and that notion of solely focused on justice with everything else around you crumbling. um, I thought that was a pretty good backdrop for the way you laid out the story. So that was very well done. How did you
Oh,
come up
thank you.
with that idea?
Well, just in terms of her, I guess what aspect? Just, uh, I guess what part of that though?
Yeah, I think that everything. Let's take her personal relationships.
Okay.
She's having issues on the home front while she's out doing her job, and it's really weighing on her. But she's still focused on that
Right.
mission.
Yeah, I mean, that was probably born out of, um, I would say, things that I've seen other officers have to go through. I think there's something very universal there because it's an incredibly difficult job. And you're not, yes, you're working the job by yourself, but at the same time, your family is the ones who have to deal with stuff, your loved ones, your romantic partner, they still have to contend with all that stuff you bring home. And for
Right.
her, she tries to leave it at the door. but it's really difficult to do. And instead, she becomes very cut off, which I think is incredibly common. The divorce rate for officers is I think twice the national average.
Yep.
So, it's not it's a hard thing. And I think it takes a lot. It takes a very strong person to be able to balance those things out. And so, as I was thinking about like her personal life, and especially as it relates to how she identifies, I felt like that would be even harder, especially during the time period, and
Yep.
in Texas. So,
Yep.
I just thought, how would this kind of be ratcheted up in a way where she can't ignore it anymore, where she's been trying to focus on her job and pretend as if everything is fine. But
Yeah.
really, her personal life has all these cracks in it. And so the cracks just keep growing and growing until they can't be ignored. And that really is what's going to propel the next in the series as well.
Yeah. No, I thought it came across very authentic, and yeah, trying to compartmentalize your life, and that never really works completely. And there's that kind of thing. But it had a very, very true ring to it. And that was one of the things that drew me to that character.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, now speaking of characters and relationships, the relationship Nia develops in the book with Desmond was is kind of, unexpected. But she's in a position of who else can she trust? Um,
Yeah.
how did you think about that relationship?
Well, I knew as I was doing the outline that they would come together in some form or fashion. And I wanted to, at the same time, make sure that they had their own storyline, solid,
Yeah.
where it was very individualized. And if you wanted to just to skip all Desmond's parts, you kind of could and still enjoy the book. You know what I mean? So that's kind of
Mhm.
how I approached it. But I knew that they were going to have kind of like this Al Pacino De Niro moment, like in Heat,
Mhm.
where they're at
Like
the
he
table and you
Yeah.
kind of, it's all laid out, and I knew that that's what it was going to be. But I also knew that a certain tragedy or peril would have to force them into being, um, I guess, accomplices together, and move them into that direction, and that they would have to identify a need and a want and a goal that would be that they both would ultimately have to experience and go after. And so that's kind of how that happened. And it's really just once they do team up, I think that they still have their moments where they have these true character moments, and we still get to see who they really are, and the fact that like uh, there's opportunities there where they could leave each other alone, like literally, like
Yeah.
it's, I'm out of here, best of luck to you, But I think that their true character moments kind of prevent them from doing that.
Yeah. No, I thought that was really well done. And Desmond is really a complex character that you kind of you unwrap him as we go through the book. Now you based Nia on Christine Nix, but how about
Loosely, very
Desmond?
loosely.
Was there was it loosely? Was there anyone that was kind of in your thoughts when you were creating Desmond's character?
Desmond, that was a lot of Curtis. So Curtis had the idea of having the thief be very organized and structured,
Gotcha.
and potentially have a background in military. And so he kind of laid the bones for that character. And then the Vietnam aspect was me, because my father had served in Vietnam.
Mm,
So I knew quite a bit about it. It's one of the periods, one of the wars in American history that's always very been interesting to me, and especially the fact it was never really declared a war. But the
right.
idea that the people who come from that time period, the amount of suffering that kind of happened quietly, has always just been so fascinating to me. And the idea with Desmond was to kind of embody some of that quiet suffering. He does a lot of quiet suffering,
Right.
and you don't at the outstart you don't really know why he's doing it, you know,
Right.
and I think when that's kind of revealed, I think hopefully readers feel some sympathy for him, and that he's not this just, you know, terrible thief who's doing these things. There's a reason for everything. And,
Right.
you know, for him, as I was writing him, you know, I really saw how he's one of those type of characters where if he had only made a left instead of a right, things might have been completely different in his life. But he made these choices, and then that he has to deal with the aftermath, and he deals with it head on. You know, and I don't know if he ever really finds redemption. I mean, I think I'm not so sure that's what Desmond's after. I think Desmond's more after peace. I don't think I think redemption is not even on the table for him, really. It's really just peace, you know, and maybe a little bit of a second chance, and he doesn't know how long that would last.
Yeah. No, I thought he was the way you revealed it, and I think you nailed it in your description there is the more you find out about the guy, there are redeeming qualities about this man. And yeah, if he had only made a different decision here and there, where would his life be? But yeah, I thought that was a really great supporting character to have, bouncing off of Nia. So well
Oh,
done.
thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
Now, you mentioned a sequel in the works. Hopefully, that's going to come out soon. Is it going to feature Amara by chance?
Oh yeah, she is going to be the main antagonist this go round. So I hint at it at the, you know, the end of the
Yeah,
book, but and it's going to bring us into present day. So uh, she's gonna it's a lot of fun writing her now because we get to see how she kind of came to be. And
good.
it's a little bit bigger of a book in terms of kind of the global scale. So she's going to go all over. There's parts of in Japan, Vietnam, and
Mhm.
so as she's building this sort of plan that she has, this this reset is how she looks at it in many ways.
Yeah,
But she's basically carrying on Desmond's work on a much bigger scale. And we'll understand why in the book and why she
yeah,
makes that decision. But again, she's another character who I think incredibly intelligent and could have done anything, but unfortunately experiences, you know, tragedy after tragedy, and that is
yeah,
what sends her on her course in volume two.
yeah. Well, no, I'm really glad to hear that she's going to be the focus of that because she was such a compelling character. When you brought her back at the end of the Accomplice, it's like, okay, I'm strapped in for this one. Let
Cool.
me have more of this. That's great. Well, you mentioned that sequel. What else are you working on? What's coming next for you, Aaron?
So I also wrote and should be finalized this week. But I wrote All the Smoke, which is a retelling, very much inspired by Patricia Highsmith's The Talented Mr. Ripley. So it's the talented Mr. Ripley set in the music industry, but primarily in hip hop.
Wow.
Um, and in my mind, I was thinking, well, I tackled sociopaths and law enforcement. So there's sociopaths and healthcare and all these other jobs. And I said, you know, it'd be interesting to see where this would go if this individual was in the music industry. And it almost becomes very like two dueling sociopaths because you have the talented Mr. Ripley kind of character who's going up against someone who is equally as troublesome and demented as he is. But the thing is, he doesn't even fully know his level of of conniving and you
Right.
know backstabbing quite yet. And you know the premise of it is it has a bit of a coming of age aspect. So about I would say half the beginning. Oh, I would say the beginning third of the book is this coming of age story, and it is set. I didn't want to do New York or I guess what we consider to be LA. So it's
Hmm.
actually set in Riverside County. Um,
Okay.
and they're very much cut off from Hollywood and all that stuff. But it's two brothers, two foster brothers, who one has this dream of being this, you know, getting out of this desert, basically, where there's nothing. It's a
Yeah.
blank canvas, and all they can do is fill that canvas with their imagination of what it would be like to go on the road and be this huge celebrity and things like that. And so and it takes place during the time when YouTube is really big. So artists are putting themselves on YouTube and they're getting deals and, all that's happening. And so they think if we could just get equipment and we can make this song and this album, we'll put it on, YouTube and everything's going to be fixed. And so, but they have no money. So they decide to rob what they believe is an empty house that still has, no one's living there, they think, but it has tons of stuff in there that they think, oh, we can pawn this stuff and we'll get equipment. It's botched though. As when they go in, they encounter there is a man living there. He's kind of this hermit character, and he comes out, and chaos ensues, and the guy has a shotgun, and they scatter. And one brother stays behind, and the other brother, who is this talented Mr. Ripley character, who has really no talent, but but basically is hoping to ride the coattails of the talented brother. Well, he gets free. And he ultimately finds the rhyme book that the brother left behind that is filled with songs. And he takes that and he runs with it. And he becomes this huge, big star. And then ultimately, the brother gets out of prison, who gets caught in the robbery and wants his life back. And so they find themselves at odds. And they're playing this one-up game of, who can outdo the other person and make your life basically hell. Each other's lives hell. So
that's great. That's a wonderful premise. Best of luck with that. That's outstanding. We'll close out with what we call 3 quick hits, and I want to put you in Nia's headspace and just 3 quick questions. Okay. What's Nia's favorite drink or cocktail? What does she like to drink?
Mai Tai.
Okay, that fits. How about her favorite music? What does she listen to?
Oh, that would be R&B, specifically Anita Baker.
Yeah, I could see that with her. And then finally, what's Nia most afraid of? What's her greatest fear?
That's a good one. I would say in the case of the story, and that may be kind of shown within this particular chapter, but it would be losing her father before she really is able to tell him the truth. And she carries a significant amount of guilt for what she did. And what she did wasn't wrong, but it's still a lot of guilt around it. And not being able to have that real conversation when they talk, it has a superficial element where there's an elephant in the room, but they'll never, ever deal with it. And for her, it would be losing him and him dying in prison before she can actually have a real conversation with him.
Yeah, well, that's well put. Folks, we talked with Aaron Philip Clarke, the author of The Accomplice, along with Curtis 50 Cent Jackson. Aaron, it's been a blast talking with you.
Oh, it's been great, Jim. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. And take care, everyone. I hope you come back again. Bye now.